Hey everybody, KMO here. There is a great 2007 documentary called King Corn, which you can watch for free right here on YouTube. It's about two recent college grads in Boston who move, along with a filmmaker, to Greene, Iowa, to grow 1 acre of corn. In the process of applying for the government subsidies, buying the seed, preparing the field, and talking to everyone up and down the agricultural production and finance chain, they learn a lot about what brought the United States to the point where we, as a nation, produce so much corn. They also dig into the topic of high fructose corn syrup and even try to make a batch in their kitchen. American agricultural policy, in its push to maximize corn production and create an ocean of cheap calories from corn, has created a health crisis and pushed more and more farming families out of farming. Earl Butz, who was the Secretary of Agriculture from 1971 to 1976, told farmers to get big or get out. And for decades, federal agricultural policy has encouraged farmers to plant commodity crops, such as corn, from fence row to fence row. Responding to these incentives, big farms swallowed up the small and medium-sized farms that Iowa farm families had been tending for generations. According to Wikipedia, quote, "These policy shifts coincided with the rise of major agribusiness corporations and the declining financial stability of the small family farm." Close quote. In this case, correlation probably is causation. Last week, Peter Zeihan sent out a newsletter that included some charts made in-house, along with some graphics from Our World in Data. He opened with this chart, which shows the proportions of the various cereal crops that make up the human diet. Humans eat more rice and wheat than anything else. And based on just this information, you might think that corn is a minor player in global agriculture and global trade. And you'd be wrong. Corn is a monster. The next slide shows the proportions of the various commodity cereals by production. Corn dwarfs even wheat. Wheat, which is the basis for all sorts of bread, from baguettes to pretzels to bagels to pizza crusts. Peter Zeihan writes, quote, "Most of you probably live in North America, and so probably don't find this all that odd. Cornbread, corn on the cob, grits, cornflakes, tortillas, these are all part and parcel of our collective experience. In the rest of the world, however, once you get past polenta, corn isn't used for much more than to line a bread pan. So why in the world is corn the top grain? Check this out." Close quote. The light blue area inside the square, representing total corn production, shows how much of the stuff we feed to animals. The corn that comes out of the ground in Iowa isn't, for the most part, destined to become popcorn or Doritos or tamales. A lot of it will be fed to cows, pigs, and chickens. And in normal times, when the demand for petroleum is high, about half the corn grown in the United States gets turned into ethanol and mixed with the gasoline we pump into our gas tanks. Except with this coronavirus lockdown in place, there is no need to stretch our gasoline supplies. We're at the start of the annual corn growing cycle when farmers prepare the ground and plant the seed. If half of U.S. corn production goes to making ethanol, and with the production war between Saudi Arabia and Russia driving oil prices into the basement and the COVID-19 lockdown destroying demand for gasoline, will U.S. corn producers compensate for current events by planting less corn? Nope. Federal agricultural policy incentivizes farmers to plant as much corn as they possibly can. These incentives are set down in the Federal Farm Bill, which comes up for review, amendment, and reauthorization every 5 years. The last Farm Bill was passed in 2018, and the next one isn't due until 2022 or 2023. The incentives which maximize corn production are not even on the table for discussion this year. So farmers will be producing as much corn as they can, just like any other year. What will happen to all that unneeded corn? Perhaps corporations will find even more uses for high fructose corn syrup. HFCS is, according to the website cornnaturally.com, a miracle ingredient. HFCS, versatility adds value. HFCS is one of the most versatile ingredients on the market. It adds texture, helps keep color, maintains quality, and enhances flavor in many foods and beverages. These are real value adds. At the same time, HFCS helps food and beverage professionals keep costs down for themselves and their customers. As an ingredient, HFCS costs less than any other caloric sweetener and offers a more stable pricing history than sugar. Have you ever noticed that while you pretty much need to visit a grocery store or farmer's market to buy vegetables, eggs, meat, or pasta, you can buy candy almost anywhere you find a cash register? Industrial candy is basically high fructose corn syrup cast into a myriad of appealing forms with a long list of chemicals to give it a range of textures, shapes, and colors. You can get candy at the grocery store, but unlike eggs or hamburger, you can also buy it at computer and office supply stores. You can buy it at gas stations, drugstores, movie theaters. Can't get out the door of your house or apartment? Representatives from your local high school sports teams and Girl Scout troops sell candy door to door to raise money for their activities. The result is that you are never far from your next dose of delicious, high-fructose corn syrup. I certainly haven't researched whether Americans could increase their HFCS intake sufficiently to soak up this year's surplus corn, but I suspect that we're pretty much full up on Twizzlers, Skittles, gummy bears, and Milk Duds. The companies that make them would love to increase their sales, but I don't think I need to spell out the downsides of that scenario. Perhaps innovative entrepreneurs will figure out a way to load HFCS into 3D printers and use it to make modular building supplies so we can all live in gingerbread houses in Candyland villages. Or maybe they'll figure out a way to turn corn husks into toilet paper, a product for which I hear demand remains strong. Speaking of paper products, science fiction has been promising us disposable paper clothes for decades, and for a hot minute in the 1960s, paper fashion was trending. Perhaps a corn glut is just the stimulus this long-simmering concept needs to really make the leap into prime time. More likely, in my opinion, is that the excess corn will go into the federal government's various strategic grain reserves. Dried and protected from rodents and insects, corn can be stored for years, if not decades, and still be useful. Those reserves could use some topping off, and that top-off might soak up this year's excess production. But what about next year? Again, the Farm Bill won't come up for amendment and reauthorization for another 3 years. The incentives to overproduce that have farmers planting way more corn than we have use for right now will still be in effect next year, and the year after that. Maybe by this time next year, we'll have this whole coronavirus thing licked, and we'll be back to business as usual, with our usual appetite for all that corn. It's not impossible, but it strikes me as unlikely. What strikes me as more likely is that next year farmers will follow the federal incentives and plant too much corn. But by the end of the season, the price for corn will be so low that it won't be worth harvesting. In that case, farmers will be able to skip the harvest and either burn their crops in the fields or just leave them there to rot. In which case, it'll be a fat winter for the field mice.